All right, YouTube. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast talking Auburn football. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. Big game coming up, obviously. We've been doing coverage on Auburn versus LSU all week now. I've been looking at a lot of the comments in the comment section, and, folks will say, well, this is the same thing that was said in the Florida game. And, one thing as fans and as analysts of the game, we have to be very cautious not to allow that common denominator to have a huge factor in how we predict how a game will turn out. For one, the common denominator with Auburn and LSU is the fact that they have both played Florida. As a matter of fact, Florida beat Auburn 24-13. Okay, you got that one. Then Florida travels down to Death Valley, takes on LSU, loses to LSU 42-28. So it's easy for the typical fan to say, well, if Auburn couldn't do this against Florida, how in the world do they expect to do it against LSU? That's where we start to get into a big world of trouble. As a matter of fact, folks were like, okay, well, how do you say that Auburn's defense is better than Florida's defense if Auburn wasn't able to beat Florida? Auburn allowed Florida to score 24 points, all of those different scenarios. You got to look at the game within the game. Number one, you have an errant quarterback in Bo Nix who missed a lot of opportunities that Joe Burrow just didn't miss and wasn't going to miss. Number two, the game down in Florida was a very highly emotional game, which I think Gus Malzahn didn't do particularly a sound job, I think, of placing not only Bo Nix, but placing the offensive team in the position to be successful. Some areas where teams were pretty successful against Florida, I thought, was the running game. You talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, was able to get Florida for over 100 yards. The running back from South Carolina was able to get Florida for over 100 yards. Even Boobie Whitlow from Auburn had some success, most of his running coming in the second half with 81 yards. Why not start something like that in the first half when Florida clearly showed some vulnerabilities between the tackles running the football, but Auburn tried to get a little too cute, tried to test the perimeter too early, especially with the types of plays that were attempted, just really were detrimental to the cause for Auburn. So that's why those two games, I think, are different. You can't really compare the two because they're two different approaches. A second thing you have to look at is no team is the same really from one week to the next, because each week gives you some formidable identity that you're going to carry on towards the end of the season, sometimes good, sometimes bad. I would go ahead and say that even just from a feeling standpoint, even though, Arkansas wasn't the greatest sample size, I just think this is a different Auburn team than what went down to Gainesville a couple of weeks ago. You have more depth. You go into your bye week relatively injury-free outside of the Boobie Whitlow injury, but you have enough depth at the running back position to carry on, to do enough and to at least do what Boobie Whitlow was able to do. Because Boobie Whitlow, yeah, he can break some here and there, but Boobie Whitlow is basically a 20-25 carry back for about 150 yards. And if you can't do that between the running backs that are on set now, then something is wrong anyway, especially with the diverse skill set. Cam Martin, Sean Shivers, Harold Joyner, Malik Miller, those guys have the, DJ Williams, those guys have the capability of at least supplementing what Boobie Whitlow can't do in his absence. But either way, I just think Auburn did not approach that game as educated looking back that they probably feel like they should have. Because it's easy for us to make, that's another thing that we do sometimes, is we make this post facto analysis. Coaches come into a game, they review film, they review video footage, and they see some things that they feel that will work. But sometimes a plan works until you think a plan will work until you get smacked in the mouth. And that's exactly what happened to Auburn early on. So what has to happen in a game like LSU, you have to avoid those moments, those smack in the mouth type moments. You need to go with some sure things early on. I like the idea of attempting to run the balls just straight up in between the tackles, or try a little zone read, something that's basic. Don't try to get too creative. Don't try to do something that will make this defense have a little more confidence than they should. I think with the play selection at the beginning of the Florida game gave Florida way more confidence than they should have had. You place Auburn in a position where you're trying to throw the ball in the very shallow flat, and that's easy. Don't give LSU those easy to defend plays and give them the confidence as if they've really, really done some damage to you, collateral damage to you offensively. That's something, defensively, that's not something you want to do. You want to go in the first couple of drives with some high percentage plays. You want to hit some quick strikes across the middle. I think Auburn has to build up to the success that they want to have in this particular game. That's why you just can't go and say, all right, well, just because it didn't work against Florida, it's definitely not going to work against LSU. I think that's just irresponsible analysis. So going into this game for Auburn, what has to happen? Well, they're going to have to go against the grain a little bit, because LSU really, really does a good job of containing running backs. They're one of the best in the SEC. They only allow about 2.8 yards per rushing attempt. So for us to say, okay, Auburn needs to rush for 250 yards, which I think is a really, really nice number to shoot for, it's not going to be easy. This team is actually pretty good at defending the run. As a matter of fact, their cornerbacks are very good at coming up and defending the run. So I just wanted to put this out there. And it's, I was looking at some of the comments, and it's like, you just can't judge a team based on how they played 3 weeks ago. Different teams, different scenarios. Auburn and LSU is actually a very, very hated rival. You got to think about this too, the emotional level that both of these teams play on. How does the emotion affect the game? You start to have penalties. You start to have turnovers. You start to get those butterflies going to where, hey, a good player like Joe Burrow might make an uncharacteristic mistake. You might get a fumble on a punt return. Things like that happen in games like this. So just be very careful. Avoid the common denominator trap. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast Talking Auburn Football. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. As always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.